Okay, folks, let me tell you about the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me. My name's Alex Reed, and back in 1996, I walked into a hotel room that changed how I see the world. This isn't some campfire tale or a movie plot. It's real, it's raw, and it still gives me chills when I think about it. Picture this. A small-town hotel, old as dirt, with creaky floors and shadows that seem to move when you're not looking. That's where I ended up, and let me tell you, I wasn't ready for what was waiting in room 214. I'm a journalist, or at least I was back then, always chasing stories that make people lean in a little closer. I'd heard whispers about the Hawthorne Inn in Blackwood, Vermont, a place folks said was haunted. Guests talked about weird noises, cold spots, and a feeling like someone's watching you sleep. I didn't buy into ghost stuff. I mean, come on, I was 32, skeptical, and figured it was all just old pipes and overactive imaginations. But a story's a story, and I needed something juicy for a piece on New England's spookiest spots. So, I packed my notebook, my cassette recorder, and a duffel bag, and drove up to Blackwood, thinking I'd get a few creepy quotes and call it a day. The Hawthorne Inn wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a shiny chain hotel with vending machines and free Wi-Fi. No. This place was like stepping into a history book. Dark wood walls, dusty chandeliers, and a smell like old books and mildew. The kind of place where you half expect a ghost to pop out, but you laugh it off because, ghosts aren't real. Or so I thought. The lady at the front desk, Mary, handed me the key to room 214 and gave me a look. Like she knew something I didn't. I brushed it off, figuring she was just playing up the hotel's spooky rep for tourists. But as I climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor, key jingling in my hand, I got this weird feeling in my gut, like I was walking into something I wasn't supposed to. The hallway was long, with faded carpet and flickering lights, and when I reached room 214, the door looked heavier than the others, like it was hiding something. I turned the key, pushed it open, and stepped inside. That's when my story really began. And trust me, it's not one I'll ever forget. Room 214 wasn't much to look at. I dropped my duffel bag on the creaky wooden floor and took it all in. A lumpy bed with a faded quilt, a chipped nightstand, and a single bulb flickering in a rusty lamp. The wallpaper was peeling, curling at the edges like it was trying to escape. There was a small window with a stuck latch, overlooking a quiet street in Blackwood, Vermont. The air smelled musty, like wet clothes left too long in a basement. I'm not one for fancy hotels, but this place felt off, like the room was holding its breath, waiting for me to notice something. I shook my head, telling myself I was just tired from the drive. Long hours on the road can mess with your head, right? I tossed my notebook on the bed and checked my cassette recorder, my trusty sidekick for interviews. I was in Blackwood to write about haunted spots for a travel magazine, and the Hawthorne Inn was the main event. The plan was simple. Talk to the staff, poke around town, maybe dig up some old stories about ghosts. Small towns love their legends, and I figured I'd get a few spooky quotes, snap some photos, and head home. But standing in that room, with the light flickering and the floor groaning under my boots, I felt a chill I couldn't explain. It wasn't cold, not exactly, just a weird heaviness, like someone was standing right behind me. I turned around, half expecting to see Mary, the front desk lady, but the room was empty. Blackwood itself was a sleepy little place, the kind of town where everyone knows your business. Main Street had a diner, a hardware store, and a library that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. The Hawthorne Inn sat at the edge of town, a 3-story beast of dark wood and narrow windows. It was built in the 1800s, back when Blackwood was a stop for travelers heading north. The locals loved it, but they also whispered about it. Stories of strange noises, lights going on and off, and guests who left in the middle of the night. Room 214 was the star of those stories. Mary had let slip that it was special, whatever that meant. Her eyes got all serious when she handed me the key, and I caught her glancing at the stairs like she didn't want to go up there. I decided to get settled before diving into work. I unpacked my clothes, plugged in my recorder, and tried the window. It wouldn't budge, the latch rusted shut. I gave up and sat on the bed, flipping through my notes. I'd read online about the inn's history, nothing concrete, just rumors. Some said a woman died in room 214 years ago, maybe a suicide. Others mentioned a kid, her son, who went missing. The details were fuzzy, but that's what I was here for, to separate fact from fiction. I grabbed my recorder and spoke into it, testing the mic. October 12, 1996, Hawthorne Inn, room 214. Let's see if this place lives up to the hype. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet room, and for a second, I swore I heard an echo, like someone whispered back. I laughed it off, blaming the old building. Places like this always feel creepy at first. I headed downstairs to grab some coffee from the lobby. Mary was still at the desk, polishing a glass, her gray hair pulled tight in a bun. "Settling in okay?" she asked, her smile a little forced. I nodded, leaning on the counter. "Heard any good ghost stories about 214? I kept my tone light, but her hands paused, and she looked at me like she was sizing me up. "Folks say it's active," she said finally. "Noises, shadows. Most guests don't stay long." She wouldn't meet my eyes, and I got the sense she wasn't telling me everything. I pushed a bit, asking about the woman who died, but she just shook her head. "Old stories, Mr. Reed. Best left alone." Back in my room, I couldn't shake Mary's words. Active? What did that even mean? I set up my recorder on the nightstand, figuring I'd capture ambient sounds for the article, maybe some creaky pipes to sell the haunted vibe. The sun was setting, painting the room orange through the dusty window. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and that heavy feeling came back, stronger now. It was like the air was pressing down, making it hard to breathe. I sat up, rubbing my neck, and noticed something weird. The door to the room was cracked open, just an inch. I was sure I'd locked it. I got up, my boots loud on the floor, and pushed it shut, turning the deadbolt. My heart was beating faster than it should have, and I told myself it was nothing. Just an old lock, maybe a draft. But as I turned back to the bed, I heard it. A faint tap, like a finger on glass, coming from the window. I froze, staring at the panes. The street below was empty, and I was on the second floor. Nobody could be out there, right? That tapping on the window stuck with me. I stood there, staring at the glass, my breath fogging up in the chilly room. The street below was dark, just a couple of streetlights flickering in Blackwood's quiet night. I was on the second floor of the Hawthorne Inn, so no way anyone was out there tapping. I told myself it was the wind, maybe a branch, but my heart was pounding like a drum. I grabbed my flashlight from my duffel bag, flicked it on, and pointed the beam at the window. Nothing, just the same stuck latch and dusty panes. I laughed, but it came out shaky. "Get a grip, Alex," I muttered, turning back to the bed. That's when I noticed the door again. It was open, just a crack. Even though I'd locked it, my stomach dropped. I crossed the room in 3 steps, my boots loud on the creaky floor, and yanked the door wide. The hallway was empty, the flickering lights casting long shadows on the faded carpet. "Hello," I called, my voice echoing. No answer. I shut the door, turned the deadbolt, and even dragged the nightstand in front of it for good measure. I wasn't scared, not yet, but I wasn't taking chances either. I sat on the bed, my cassette recorder still on the nightstand, and hit record. "Room 214, 11:37 p.m., I said, trying to sound calm. "Heard tapping at the window. Door keeps opening. Probably just old wiring or something." I stopped the tape, but the room felt smaller, like the walls were inching closer. I tried to sleep, but every creak and groan of the inn kept me on edge. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a new sound. Tapping again, but this time it wasn't the window. It was coming from the wall behind the bed, slow and deliberate, like someone knocking with one finger.
Top, top, top.
I sat up, my flashlight shaking in my hand, and aimed it at the wall. The peeling wallpaper looked normal, no cracks or holes. The taps got faster, turning into a rhythm, almost like a kid's nursery rhyme. I held my breath, waiting for it to stop. Didn't. Instead, it moved, circling the room, tapping from the ceiling, then the door, then back to the wall. My skin crawled, and I hit record on my cassette player. "It's 2:14 a.m., I whispered. "Something's tapping in the walls. Sounds like a pattern." When I played the tape back, I expected to hear the taps, maybe use it for my article. But all I got was static, loud and crackling, with a faint hum underneath, like a voice trying to break through. I rewound and tried again, same thing. My hands were sweaty, and I set the recorder down, telling myself it was broken. I grabbed my notebook instead, scribbling what I'd heard, but the pen felt heavy, like I was writing through mud. That's when I saw it. The window was open. Not wide, just an inch, but I hadn't touched it. The latch was still rusted shut, so how the heck did it move? A cold breeze slipped in, and the curtains twitched, like fingers brushing the fabric. I slammed the window shut, my heart racing. "This place is messing with me?" I said out loud, hoping my voice would steady me. Didn't. I checked the clock, 3 a.m. No way I was sleeping now. I paced the room, flashlight in one hand, recorder in the other, and decided to head downstairs. Maybe Mary was still at the desk. Or maybe I just needed to get out of that room. The hallway was darker than before, the lights dimmer, and every step made the floor groan. When I reached the lobby, it was empty, the front desk abandoned. A single bulb buzzed overhead, and the air smelled sharper, like damp wood and something sour. I called for Mary, but my voice just bounced off the walls. Back in room 214, I locked the door again and sat on the bed, my flashlight beam dancing across the wallpaper. I was about to give up and pack my bag when I heard it. A whisper, soft and low, coming from the corner near the window. "Alex," it said, clear as day. I froze, my mouth dry. It wasn't the wind or my imagination. It was my name, spoken like someone was standing right there. I swung the flashlight over, but the corner was empty, just shadows. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice cracking. No answer, but the whisper came again, this time from behind me. "Alex." I spun around, nearly dropping the flashlight. Nothing. The room was dead quiet, but that heavy feeling was back, pressing on my chest like a weight. I don't know how I got through that night. I kept the light on, my back against the headboard, clutching my recorder like it could protect me. By morning, the room felt normal again, the sunlight streaming through the window like nothing had happened. I checked the door, it was still locked, the nightstand in place. The window was shut tight. I played the cassette again, hoping for answers, but it was just static, no whispers, no taps. I was exhausted, my eyes gritty, but I wasn't ready to quit. If this place was haunted, I needed proof for my story. Plus, a part of me, a stubborn part, wanted to know what was going on. I headed to the diner across the street for coffee, my notebook tucked under my arm. The place was warm, smelling of bacon and syrup, and I slid into a booth, trying to shake off the night. The waitress, a woman named Betty with a kind smile, poured me a cup and lingered. "You're at the Hawthorne, right?" she asked, glancing at my recorder. I nodded, and her smile faded. "Heard you're in 214. Be careful up there." I leaned forward, sensing a lead. "Why's that?" She hesitated, wiping her hands on her apron. "Folks say a lady died in that room, long time ago. Lost her kid, went crazy with grief. Some guests hear things, tapping, whispers. One guy swore he saw her in the mirror." I scribbled it down, my pulse quickening. "Her name?" I asked. Betty shrugged. "Eliza, I think. Old story. Just watch yourself." Back at the inn, I found Mary at the desk, her face tighter than yesterday. I didn't waste time. "Tell me about Eliza," I said, keeping my voice low. Mary's eyes widened, and she busied herself with some papers. "Just rumors," she muttered. "A woman, maybe 1920s, killed herself in 214 after her son died in the war. Guests make up stories, knocks, voices. It's an old building." She wouldn't look at me, and I knew she was holding back. I pressed her about the son, but she shook her head. "Leave it alone, Mr. Reed. Some things don't need digging up." I went back to room 214, my mind racing. Eliza, a grieving mother, a dead son, and a room that wouldn't stay quiet. I set my recorder on the nightstand, ready for another night, but something caught my eye. On the bed, where I'd left my notebook, was a small book I didn't recognize. It was old, leather-bound, with yellowed pages. I hadn't brought it, and it wasn't there when I left for the diner. I picked it up, my hands cold, and opened it. The first page had one line, written in shaky ink. "My Tommy is waiting in the dark." My blood ran cold. This wasn't my book. So whose was it, and how did it get here? I sat on the bed in room 214, staring at that leather-bound book like it was a snake ready to bite. The words, "My Tommy is waiting in the dark," burned into my brain. I hadn't brought this thing, and it wasn't here when I left for the diner. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages, the paper brittle and yellowed, smelling like dust and time. The handwriting was shaky, full of loops and smudges, like someone wrote it in a hurry. "Tommy calls me every night," one page read. "He's cold without me." Another said, "The room keeps him safe, but it's hungry." My stomach twisted. This was no prop left by the inn for spooky vibes. This was something else. Something tied to Eliza, the woman Betty and Mary mentioned, who'd lost her son and died in this room. I set the book down, my heart hammering. The room felt smaller, the air thick like I was breathing through a blanket. I grabbed my cassette recorder, hit record, and whispered, "Found a book, maybe a diary in room 214. Talks about Tommy." It's 10 a.m., October 13th, 1996. My voice sounded thin, like I was trying to convince myself I wasn't freaking out. I needed answers, so I headed to the Blackwood Library, a squat brick building a few blocks away. The librarian, a guy named Harold with thick glasses, pointed me to the archives, boxes of old newspapers and town records. I dug through them, my fingers smudged with dust, looking for anything about Eliza Carter. It didn't take long. A 1920 article from the Blackwood Gazette confirmed what Betty said. Eliza Carter, 34, took her own life in room 214 of the Hawthorne Inn. Her son, Tommy, 10, had died in 1918, a soldier in World War I killed overseas. The article called it a tragedy, said Eliza went mad with grief, talking to walls and singing lullabies to an empty room. But there was something else. A small note in the margin of a later issue, handwritten in faded ink. She cursed the room, said anyone who stays will see her boy. My mouth went dry, copied it down, my pen shaking, and found a grainy photo of Eliza. She had long hair, sad eyes, and a face that looked like it carried 100 years of pain. I'd seen that face before, not in person, but in a flicker in the bathroom mirror last night, gone before I could be sure. Back at the inn, I felt like I was walking into a trap. The lobby was quiet, Mary nowhere in sight. I climbed the stairs, each step heavier, and unlocked room 214. The book was still on the bed, but now it was open to a new page, one I hadn't seen. "He needs a friend." It read, the ink fresh, like it was written while I was gone. I dropped the book, backing away, and checked the door locked, deadbolt in place. My flashlight beam swept the room, catching the window. It was open again, just a crack, the curtains swaying. I slammed it shut, my hands cold, and heard a faint giggle, like a kid playing hide and seek. Came from under the bed. I froze, my breath stuck in my throat. I'm not proud to admit it, but I didn't look under there. Instead, I grabbed my recorder and hit play, hoping to catch the sound. Nothing but static, same as before. I spoke into it, my voice barely a whisper. Heard a giggle, 3 p.m. books writing itself. I'm losing it. I set the recorder down and paced, trying to think. This wasn't just creaky pipes or my imagination. Something was in this room and it knew my name. I thought about packing up and leaving, but my journalist brain wouldn't let me. I needed to know more for the story, sure, but also because I couldn't shake the feeling that Eliza, or Tommy, wanted me to stay. That night, things got worse. I was lying on the bed, the lamp on, when the whispers started again. Alex, they said, soft and slow, coming from the walls, the ceiling, everywhere. I sat up, flashlight in hand, and the whispers changed. Tommy, they said over and over like a chant. The room got colder, my breath fogging in the air. I grabbed my camera, a Polaroid I used for quick shots, and snapped a picture of the room. The flash lit up the walls, and for a second, I swore I saw a shape. A woman, tall and thin, standing by the window. When the photo developed, it was blurry, but there was something there, a smudge where her face should be. My hands shook as I stuffed it in my notebook. I needed help. I called a friend, Sarah, who'd studied folklore and knew about paranormal stuff. She lived in Boston, too far to come, but I got her on the inn's lobby phone. Sounds like a residual haunting, she said, her voice crackly through the line. Eliza's grief might have trapped her and Tommy in that room. Try a simple protection, salt around your bed, maybe a prayer. It could calm things down. I thanked her, feeling a bit silly, but I wasn't laughing when I got back to 214. The book was open again. New words on the page. Stay with us. I grabbed a salt shaker from the diner, poured a shaky circle around the bed, and muttered a prayer I half remembered from childhood. Keep me safe, I said, feeling like an idiot. It didn't work. Around midnight, the salt scattered, like someone kicked it. The whispers turned into a low hum, and the mirror in the bathroom fogged up, even though I hadn't run the water. I watched, heart pounding, as a word appeared, written in the steam. Stay. I wiped it away, but my reflection looked wrong. My eyes too dark, my face too pale. I backed out, slamming the bathroom door, and heard that giggle again, louder, from the closet. I didn't open it. Instead, I sat on the bed, clutching my flashlight, and waited for dawn. The whispers never stopped, looping my name and Tommy's, and the book sat open, its pages flipping slowly, like someone was reading it. The next morning I was a wreck, but I wasn't done. I went back to the library, digging deeper. I found a 1921 police report, buried in a box of town records. It said guests in room 214 reported seeing a boy, maybe 10, playing with a red ball. One guest swore he woke up to the boy sitting on his chest, staring with black eyes. The report called it hysteria, but I wasn't so sure. I also found a letter, tucked in an old book, from a maid who worked at the inn in the 30s. Eliza's still here, it read. She wants her boy back, but the room won't let them go. It takes more. Takes more? What did that mean? I tracked down Joe, a janitor who'd worked at the inn for years. He was in his 60s, wiry, with hands like sandpaper. I found him sweeping the back porch, and he didn't look surprised when I mentioned 214. Seen things in that room, he said, not meeting my eyes. A kid, maybe 10, bouncing a red ball. Thought it was a guest's son, but no kids were checked in. He looked at me, eyes all wrong, and vanished. I asked about Eliza, and Joe's face hardened. She's looking for someone to stay with her boy. Most folks run. You're still here, though. He walked away, leaving me with a chill that wasn't just the Vermont air. Back in 214, I read more of the book. One page stopped me cold. The room needs a friend for Tommy, or he'll never rest. The words felt like a warning. I took another Polaroid, aiming at the mirror. This time, the photo showed a clear shape. A boy, small and pale, standing behind me. I was alone when I took it. I dropped the camera, my breath short, and heard the giggle again, right by my ear. The room was closing in, and I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. Eliza and Tommy were here, and they weren't just ghosts, they wanted something from me. That Polaroid of the boy behind me was the last straw. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I stared at it. The blurry shape of a kid, pale, small, with dark eyes, standing right where I'd been alone. Room 214 wasn't just haunted. It was alive, and Eliza and Tommy were playing games I didn't understand. I was scared out of my mind, but I wasn't running. Not yet.
I'm a journalist. I chase truth.
even when it's terrifying. Plus, a part of me felt like Eliza was begging for help. Her words in that creepy diary looping in my head. Tommy needs a friend. Whatever they wanted, I had to end it. For my sanity and maybe for them too. It was my last night in Blackwood, October 14th, 1996. I called Sarah again from the lobby phone. My voice low so Mary wouldn't overhear. Sarah sounded worried. Alex, you're in deep, she said. That room's holding them, Eliza and Tommy. You need to break the cycle. Get salt, candles, and burn something tied to them like that diary. Say their names. Tell them to rest. I scribbled it down, feeling half crazy but desperate. I ran to the diner, grabbed another salt shaker, and bought a pack of candles from the hardware store. Back at the inn, Joe was mopping the lobby. He saw my bag of supplies and shook his head. You're messing with things you don't understand, he said, but he didn't stop me. In room 214, the air was heavy, like a storm was brewing inside. The diary was open on the bed. New words scrawled. He's waiting for you. I ignored the chill down my spine and set up my ritual. I poured salt in a circle around the bed, placed 4 candles at the corners, and lit them with shaky hands. The flames flickered, casting shadows that danced like figures on the walls. I held the diary, my flashlight tucked under my arm, and started reading aloud, my voice wobbly. Eliza Carter, Tommy Carter, it's time to rest. You don't need to stay here. Let go. The words felt hollow, but I kept going, hoping Sarah was right. The room didn't like it. The candles flared, then dimmed, and the air got so cold my teeth chattered. The whispers came back, louder, a mix of Alex and Tommy, swirling around me. I gripped the diary tighter, my knuckles white, and kept reading. You're free. You don't need a friend. Go to peace. That's when it started. The floor shook, like a train was passing under the inn. The candles went out, all at once, plunging the room into darkness except for my flashlight's weak beam. The whispers turned into a wail, high and sharp, like a mother's cry. I stumbled back, tripping over the salt circle, and saw her. Eliza was there, standing by the window, her long hair covering her face, her dress gray and tattered. She wasn't solid, more like smoke shaped into a person, but her presence filled the room with grief so heavy I could barely breathe. She reached out, her fingers long and bony, and I felt a pull, like she was dragging me into her pain. Tommy, she whispered, her voice echoing inside my skull. I swung my flashlight, the beam cutting through her, but she didn't flinch. Then I saw him. Tommy, small and pale, standing on the bed, his eyes black voids, holding a red ball. He smiled, but it wasn't a kid's smile. It was wrong, too wide, too empty. I panicked, my heart slamming against my ribs. Leave me alone, I shouted, my voice cracking. I grabbed a candle, relit it with my lighter, and held it like a weapon. Tommy dropped the ball, and it rolled across the floor, bouncing with a sound like laughter, high and sharp. The diary fell from my hands, pages tearing as it hit the ground. I snatched it up, ripping a page that said, "The room keeps us." I lit the page with the candle, the flame catching fast, and held it high. Eliza, Tommy, this ends now, I yelled, tossing the burning page into the salt circle. The fire flared, unnaturally bright, and the wail turned into a scream, so loud I covered my ears. Eliza lunged, her shadow wrapping around me, cold as ice. I felt her grief, her loss, like it was mine, and for a second, I saw Tommy's face. Not the creepy kid on the bed, but a real boy, scared and alone, calling for his mom. My eyes burned, and I shouted, "I'm not your friend. Let go." I kicked the salt, scattering it, and threw more pages into the fire. The room shook harder, the walls creaking like they'd collapse. Tommy's ball rolled faster, bouncing against the walls, and his shadow grew, filling the room. I grabbed my Polaroid, snapped a shot, and the flash lit up everything. Eliza's face, eyes black and hollow, inches from mine. The fire spread to the diary, consuming it, and the shadows screamed, a sound like wind through a broken window. Eliza reached for me, her fingers brushing my arm, cold as death, but the fire roared, and she pulled back, her shape dissolving into smoke. Tommy's shadow flickered, his ball stopping dead in the center of the room. The shaking stopped, the screams faded, and the room went still. The candles relit themselves, their flames steady, and the air warmed, like the inn was breathing again. I collapsed on the bed, gasping, my flashlight rolling to the floor. The diary was ash, the Polaroid beside me showing nothing but an empty room. I didn't feel alone anymore, but I didn't feel safe either. I sat there till dawn, too shaken to move. When the sun rose, I checked the room. Window shut, door locked, salt scattered. The red ball was gone, like it never existed. I packed my bag, my hands still trembling, and headed downstairs. Mary was at the desk, her face pale when she saw me. "You're leaving?" she asked, like she hadn't expected me to make it through the night. I nodded, tossing the key on the counter. "Room 214's all yours," I said, my voice hoarse. She didn't smile, just looked at the key like it was cursed. "It's empty now," she said softly, "but it always calls someone back." I didn't ask what she meant. I just wanted out. I threw my bag in my car and drove away from Blackwood, the Hawthorne Inn shrinking in my rearview mirror. My notebook was full of scribbles. Eliza, Tommy, the diary. But the Polaroids were blank, every single one. The cassette tapes? Just static. I told myself it was over, that I'd broken whatever held them. But as I hit the highway, I kept hearing Mary's words. "It always calls someone back." I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white, and tried to focus on the road. I wasn't sure what I'd faced in that room, but I knew one thing. I wasn't the same guy who'd checked in. And deep down, I wondered if Eliza and Tommy were really gone, or if they were waiting for me to come back. I drove out of Blackwood with the windows down, letting the cold Vermont air snap me back to reality. The Hawthorne Inn was just a speck in my rearview mirror, but I couldn't shake the weight of room 214. My notebook was stuffed with frantic scribbles. Eliza's grief, Tommy's black eyes, that diary burning to ash, but I had no proof. The Polaroids were blank. The cassette tapes hissed with static, and the red ball was gone like it never existed. I told myself I'd done enough, that I'd set them free by torching the diary. But Mary's words haunted me. "It always calls someone back." Was it really over? Or was I kidding myself? Back home in Boston, I tried to move on. I wrote my article, but it felt hollow, just vague rumors about the inn. No mention of whispers or shadows. I couldn't bring myself to tell the whole truth. Who'd believe me? I locked my notes in a drawer and avoided old hotels, sticking to chain motels with bright lights and no history. But Eliza and Tommy didn't let go. Some nights, when I was alone, I'd hear a faint tap, like a finger on glass, coming from nowhere. I checked the windows, the walls, but find nothing. My dreams were worse. Dark rooms, a woman's wail, and a boy with a red ball, smiling that awful smile. A month later, I got a call from my friend Sarah. She'd borrowed my camera to develop some old film, and she sounded shaken. "Alex, there's a photo from Blackwood," she said. "It's you in that room, but there's someone behind you." My stomach dropped. I drove to her place, and she showed me the print. It was me, standing in room 214, my face pale, flashlight in hand. Behind me, clear as day, was a figure, tall, thin, with long hair and eyes like black holes. Eliza. I hadn't taken that photo. I burned it in Sarah's backyard, the flames hissing, but the image stuck in my head. I don't know what I left behind in room 214. Did I free Eliza and Tommy? Or just make them mad? Was the room still hungry, like the diary said, waiting for its next guest? I never went back to Blackwood, but sometimes, when it's quiet, I hear my name whispered, soft and sad, like a mother calling her child. I tell myself it's the wind, but I keep my lights on, just in case. The Hawthorne Inn is still out there, and room 214 is still empty. until someone else checks in.